The moment Tom Bauer said those two words, Prince Harry stopped breathing, not literally, but the kind of stop that happens when your soul suddenly realizes it may have been living inside a lie. This wasn't some messy tabloid rumor whispered in dark corners. This was colder, cleaner, more dangerous. Because it wasn't shouted. It was delivered under oath in a courtroom where truth doesn't beg for attention, it detonates quietly, and then watches everything burn.
Hope that somebody will come along and say there's money in this, let's support Meghan and her as ever brand. I thought she behaved so badly, and then Harry too.
London Supreme Court has never experienced a storm like the one that just hit its hallowed halls. Forget Netflix documentaries, forget the global media spectacles, forget every glossy interview promising inside access. Someone with a sharp set of eyes has noticed perhaps a mistruth in the Oprah interview. And that was the moment the fairy tale cracked. Because this wasn't just about Meghan anymore. This was about Harry's entire world collapsing in slow motion while millions watched. Inside Courtroom 7, the air wasn't air anymore. It was pressure, thick, suffocating. Every single person in that room knew they weren't about to hear something ordinary. They were about to witness a man dismantle a dynasty, piece by piece, using nothing but facts sharpened like knives. Tom Bauer didn't rush. He didn't need to. Men like him understand that silence is more terrifying than shouting. Harry sat frozen, completely still. His jaw locked so tightly it looked painful. Meghan sat beside him.
Someone with a sharp set of eyes has noticed perhaps a mistruth in the Oprah interview.
Spine straight, chin lifted, wearing the same polished mask she had perfected for years. The mask that said nothing could touch her. But hands never lie. Her fingers clutched her handbag so hard her knuckles turned pale, betraying what her face refused to admit. She knew something was coming. And then Tom Bauer dropped the first fracture. Not loudly, not dramatically, just two words. Trevor Engelson. It was like the room itself flinched. Because Trevor wasn't supposed to exist anymore. He was supposed to be a ghost, a forgotten chapter. A disposable footnote in Meghan's carefully rewritten life story. But ghosts have a way of returning when truth demands witnesses. Harry blinked once, slowly. You could see it in his eyes, that microscopic flicker of confusion. The kind that appears when reality suddenly doesn't match the story you've been living inside. Tom Bauer didn't look at Meghan. He looked directly at Harry. And then he said something that would haunt Harry long after the courtroom emptied. He spoke about timelines. Cold timelines. Precise timelines. Timelines that didn't align with the fairy tale. Because according to Bauer, Meghan's divorce from Trevor wasn't the clean break the world had been sold. It wasn't the emotional ending of one chapter before the magical beginning of another. It overlapped. And overlap is a dangerous word when royal bloodlines are involved. Bauer described communication patterns that never truly ended. Connections that didn't vanish. Threads that stayed alive beneath the surface while Meghan stepped into Harry's world, smiling, glowing, becoming royalty. And Harry looked like a man watching his own memories betray him. Because suddenly, moments he once trusted began rearranging themselves into something unfamiliar. Late nights, unexplained absences, quiet phone calls, details that meant nothing before, now meaning everything. The courtroom could feel it happening inside him. The slow, unbearable realization that love might not have been the only force guiding the story. Meghan's composure began to fracture. Not dramatically, subtly. Her breathing changed, her posture tightened. Because Bauer wasn't guessing. He was presenting evidence, documented travel records, verified communications, testimonies from insiders who had watched everything unfold from behind palace walls. People who had stayed silent for years until now. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait, they grow heavier, and eventually someone decides they're tired of carrying them. Harry's face drained of color. He didn't look angry, he didn't look defensive, he looked lost. Like a man suddenly questioning whether the life he had sacrificed everything for was built on something solid or something carefully constructed. Because Harry hadn't just married Meghan, he had detonated his entire past for her. He walked away from his brother, from his father, from the institution that had defined his existence since birth. He burned bridges he could never rebuild, all for love, or at least what he believed was love. And now Tom Bower was standing in front of him, quietly suggesting that love might have been only part of the equation. Strategy, he implied, was the other part. Calculated, measured, precise. Bower described Meghan not as emotional, but tactical, not reactive, but deliberate. A woman who understood timing, who understood leverage, who understood exactly when to close doors and when to leave them slightly open, especially doors connected to powerful men. The mention of Trevor wasn't accidental, it was surgical, because Trevor wasn't just an ex-husband. He was someone who knew Meghan before royalty ever existed in her orbit. Someone who had seen her before the cameras, before the titles, before the reinvention. Someone who knew the original version. And that made him dangerous. Harry shifted in his seat. His hands clasped together tightly, like he was holding himself together physically as the emotional ground beneath him shifted. Because every man believes he knows the woman he loves, until someone presents evidence that suggests he may not. Bower continued, relentless but calm. He described how palace insiders had quietly noticed irregularities long before the public ever suspected anything. Irregularities that were ignored, explained away, buried beneath the machinery of royal protection. Because protecting the crown sometimes means protecting uncomfortable truths, and sometimes it means protecting illusions. Harry's breathing became shallow. His eyes stopped focusing. He wasn't looking at Bower anymore. He was looking inward, replaying memories, replaying decisions, replaying sacrifices. Because if even part of what Bower was suggesting was true, then Harry hadn't just lost his family. He had lost himself. Meghan suddenly stood up, abruptly. Too abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the courtroom floor, the sound slicing through the suffocating silence. Every head turned. Her face was pale now, not the composed calm the world recognized, but something else, something raw, something exposed. She didn't speak. She didn't defend herself. She didn't deny anything. She simply turned and walked out. Fast. Too fast. The door slammed behind her. And in that moment, something invisible shattered. Harry didn't follow her immediately. He just sat there, alone, surrounded by strangers, listening to a man dismantle the reality he had built his entire future on. Because Tom Bower wasn't finished, not even close. He hadn't even revealed the document yet. The one insiders were whispering about. The one tied directly to Meghan's divorce. The one that could explain everything. The one that, if real, didn't just threaten Meghan's image, it threatened Harry's entire existence. And Harry was about to hear exactly what was inside it. The document didn't look dangerous. That was the terrifying part. It wasn't thick. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sealed with some royal insignia or stamped with ominous warnings. It was just paper. Ordinary paper. Quiet. Still. Sitting in Tom Bower's hand like it had been waiting years for this exact moment. And yet, every person in that courtroom knew it carried the weight of destruction. Because paper doesn't scream when it destroys lives, it whispers. Harry hadn't moved since Meghan fled the room. He sat there like someone whose body hadn't yet received the signal that his world was ending. His eyes stayed locked on Bower's hand, like he already knew whatever was inside that file wasn't just about Meghan's past. It was about his future. Bower didn't rush. He let the silence stretch long enough for fear to grow inside it. That's what made him dangerous. He understood that truth doesn't need speed, it needs timing. And then he said it. Meghan's divorce contract. Not the public version, not the sanitized version the media had seen. The real version. The private one. The one that never expected to see daylight. Harry's fingers tightened around the edge of his chair. Because suddenly, Trevor Engelson wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was evidence. Bauer explained that divorce contracts, especially among people climbing toward influence, don't just end marriages. They define futures. They protect leverage, they preserve advantages, and according to his investigation, Meghan's divorce agreement wasn't written like the ending of a relationship. It was written like the preparation for something bigger, something strategic, something coming. Harry blinked hard, like he was trying to force his mind to reject what he was hearing, because he remembered Meghan telling him that chapter of her life was finished, closed, buried, meaningless. But this contract suggested otherwise. Bauer described clauses that didn't look emotional. They looked protective, structured, calculated. Language that ensured control over personal timelines. Language that shielded private communications. Language that didn't belong in the ending of a simple love story. It belonged in the planning of a transition. Harry's breathing became uneven. Because love doesn't usually require legal insurance for future identities. Strategy does. Bauer's voice stayed calm, surgical, precise. He explained that certain contractual protections suggested Meghan anticipated entering a higher profile life long before the world ever knew she would meet Harry. And that implication was nuclear, because it meant Harry may not have been the unpredictable miracle Meghan described. He may have been the destination, not the surprise. Harry's chest rose slowly, heavily, like every breath had suddenly become work. Because that possibility changed everything. It transformed coincidence into intention. It transformed romance into trajectory. It transformed love into positioning. The courtroom remained silent, but inside Harry's mind, noise exploded. Every memory rearranged itself. Their first conversations, her fascination with royal life, her calmness under pressure, her seamless adjustment to global attention. At the time, Harry saw strength. Now, under Bauer's words, it began to look like preparation. Because preparation doesn't panic. Preparation executes. Bauer described how divorce contracts sometimes include confidentiality provisions, not just to protect past relationships, but to protect future ones, future opportunities, future identities, future transformations. And that's when Harry's eyes dropped to the floor, because he understood what that meant. It meant Meghan's past wasn't just something she escaped. It was something she managed, carefully, precisely, intentionally. Harry's jaw tightened again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was pain. The quiet, suffocating pain of a man realizing he may have walked willingly into a life someone else had already mapped out. Because Harry hadn't just fallen in love. He had detonated his royal identity for her. He had burned centuries of tradition behind him. He had chosen exile, chosen isolation, chosen her. And now, sitting in that courtroom, he faced the possibility that she had chosen something else entirely. Not him, but what he represented. Power, escape, elevation. Bauer never accused directly. He didn't need to. He simply presented timelines, contracts, patterns, evidence. Because truth doesn't need emotion to be devastating. Harry finally lifted his eyes again, but they weren't the same eyes anymore. They weren't the eyes of a prince defending his wife against cruel media. They were the eyes of a man confronting the possibility that he had misunderstood everything. His love, his sacrifice, his rebellion, everything. The courtroom air felt colder now, heavier, because once doubt enters love, it doesn't leave quietly. It infects everything. Harry's memories, Harry's trust, Harry's identity. Because if Meghan's life had been moving toward this outcome long before Harry realized it, then Harry hadn't been her escape. He had been her arrival. And that realization is the most dangerous weapon in the world, not because it proves betrayal, but because it makes betrayal possible. Bauer closed the file slowly, not dramatically, just enough to signal that the damage had already been done. Because destruction doesn't happen when the bomb explodes. It happens when the truth settles in afterward. Harry didn't cry, he didn't speak, he didn't move. He just sat there alone inside his thoughts, surrounded by strangers who now understood his life better than he did. Because the most brutal part wasn't the contract. It was what the contract represented. Control, preparation, intent. And Harry realized something terrifying in that moment. He had sacrificed his kingdom for love, but love had never required a contract. Strategy did. And now the question wasn't whether Harry's world had shattered, it was whether it had ever been real in the first place. Because once a man begins questioning the foundation of his love, there is no palace in the world strong enough to protect him from the truth.